The night air was still, pressing against the windows like an invisible force. Inside the dimly lit bedroom, Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The soft hum of the clock on the wall was the only sound in the quiet house, but her mind was anything but silent. Something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. For weeks, her husband, Mark, had been acting strangely. He wasn't the type to keep secrets, at least. That's what she had always believed. But lately, he had been sneaking out of bed in the middle of the night, careful not to wake her, and disappearing into the garage for hours at a time. Every night, like clockwork, he would slip out the door, thinking she was asleep. And every morning, he would return, slipping under the covers like nothing had happened. At first, Sarah had convinced herself that it was nothing. Maybe he was just working on a project or trying to clear his head. But the more she thought about it, the more uneasy she felt. Why was he so secretive? What could possibly be so important that he had to hide it from her? And why did he look so exhausted during the day, like a man carrying a heavy burden? Sarah wanted to ask him directly, but something held her back. Maybe she was afraid of the answer. Maybe she wasn't ready to hear whatever truth he was keeping from her. But she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in her gut any longer. She needed to know. That night, as Mark got up once again and quietly left the room, Sarah made a decision. She wasn't going to just lie there anymore, drowning in her thoughts. She was going to find out the truth for herself. She reached for her wheelchair, her hands shaking slightly as she maneuvered herself into it. Moving as silently as possible, she followed him, making sure to keep her distance. The hallway was dark, and the faint glow of moonlight from the window cast long shadows on the walls. Her heart pounded in her chest as she moved closer to the garage door, careful not to let the wheels of her chair make too much noise. As she approached, she heard something, soft clanking, the sound of tools being used. Mark was working on something, but what? Holding her breath, she pushed the door open just a crack, just enough to see inside without being noticed. And then she saw him. Mark was hunched over a table, his back to her, completely absorbed in what he was doing. The garage, usually filled with his old tools and spare car parts, had been transformed. Shelves were lined with materials she didn't recognize, and in the center of the room was something she never expected to see. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The realization hit her like a wave, and suddenly, everything made sense. The late nights, the secrecy, the exhaustion written all over his face. But why? Why hadn't he told her? She wanted to call out to him, to demand answers, but she hesitated. Instead, she waited, watching as he continued his work, completely unaware that his secret was no longer a secret. And then, as if sensing her presence, Mark turned around. Their eyes met. And in that moment, Sarah knew. Whatever was happening in that garage was about to change everything. Mark's face drained of color the moment his eyes locked onto Sarah's. He looked like a man caught in the middle of something he never wanted her to see. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound in the garage was the faint hum of a small lamp flickering overhead. Sarah's fingers tightened around the wheels of her chair. She hadn't planned what she would do when he finally saw her. She had been so focused on uncovering the truth that she never stopped to think about what would come next. Now, here they were, staring at each other, with a secret sitting between them like a heavy weight. Mark opened his mouth, then quickly shut it again, as if scrambling for the right words. He took a step toward her, then hesitated. "You shouldn't be here," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's heart clenched. "I could say the same to you." Mark exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. His other hand rested on the work table, and now that Sarah could see more clearly, she realized what was in front of him. A strange metal frame, small wires, and what looked like electronic components. It wasn't a car part. It wasn't anything she recognized. "What is this?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with unease. Mark didn't answer right away. He glanced down at the half-finished project on the table, then back at her. His jaw tensed, and for the first time in their years of marriage, Sarah saw something in his eyes that scared her. It wasn't anger. It wasn't guilt, it was fear. You need to trust me, he said. Please, just go back inside. Sarah let out a bitter laugh, though there was no humor in it. Trust you? After sneaking around for weeks? After lying to me? Her voice rose slightly, emotions bubbling to the surface. I've been lying awake every night wondering why my husband disappears for hours. And now that I finally find you, you tell me to just forget what I saw. Mark ran a hand through his hair, frustration flickering across his face. It's not like that, Sarah. I swear. I wanted to tell you. I didn't know how. Sarah swallowed hard. She wanted to believe him, but how could she? He was keeping something from her, something big. She looked past him, taking in every detail of the garage. The cluttered workbench, the scattered tools, the laptop open with blueprints on the screen. It was all connected to whatever secret he was hiding. A sudden thought crossed her mind, one that made her stomach twist. Are you in trouble? She asked, her voice softer now. Is someone making you do this? Mark's eyes widened slightly. No, it's nothing like that. He sighed and took another step closer, lowering his voice. Sarah, I promise you, I'm not in danger. And I would never put you in danger either. Then why are you acting like this? She whispered. He hesitated. Because if I tell you the truth, everything will change. Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. Everything will change. What did that mean? She wanted to push him for more, demand answers right then and there, but the look on his face stopped her. He wasn't just keeping a secret, he was protecting something. Or someone. A sudden beeping sound filled the room, coming from his laptop. Mark's head snapped toward it, his expression shifting into something unreadable. He quickly moved to the screen, scanning the data as his fingers hovered over the keyboard. Sarah watched him carefully, studying his every move. She had never seen him like this before, so focused, so tense. He was always calm, always steady, but right now, it was like he was holding his breath, waiting for something to happen. Mark, she said cautiously, what's going on? He didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed glued to the screen. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he let out a breath and turned to her. I need more time, he said quietly. Just a little more time. Sarah stared at him, her chest tightening. Time for what? What was he working on? Why was he acting like this? Mark must have seen the conflict in her eyes because he took a step closer, gently resting a hand on her shoulder. I know this isn't fair to you, he admitted. I know how it looks. But I swear to you, I'm not doing anything wrong. I just need you to trust me a little longer. Sarah wanted to fight back, to demand the truth, but something about the way he looked at her made her hesitate. His eyes weren't cold or distant. They were pleading. Her mind was spinning, trying to put the pieces together. Whatever Mark was doing, it wasn't illegal. He wasn't in danger, but it was something big. Something life-changing. She didn't know if she could walk away now, not after coming this far. But for the first time, she wasn't sure if she was ready to hear the truth either. Mark gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze before stepping back. Go inside, he said softly. Please. Sarah didn't move right away. She looked at him one last time, searching for something, some clue, some reassurance that everything was okay. But she didn't find it. Instead, she nodded slowly, turning her chair back toward the door. As she rolled away, she could still feel his eyes on her, watching her go. And for the first time in their marriage, she realized she wasn't sure if she truly knew the man she had married. That night, Sarah barely slept. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with questions. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mark's face. The way his expression had shifted the moment he realized she'd have found him, the urgency in his voice when he begged her to trust him. She'd have thought she knew everything about her husband. Now she wasn't so sure. She replayed the scene in the garage over and over in her head. The strange metal frame, the wires, the laptop with the mysterious blueprints. Whatever he was building, it wasn't something ordinary. And it wasn't something he wanted her to know about, at least not yet. Her instincts screamed that this was bigger than she could understand. But the real question was why he was keeping it from her. Mark had always been open with her, always made her feel like they were in everything together. So why, now, did he feel the need to sneak around? As the hours passed, she told herself she would wait, that she would give him the time he asked for. But the more she tried to ignore it, the more restless she became. By morning, she had made up her mind. She wasn't going to just sit in the dark and pretend nothing was happening. If Mark wouldn't tell her the truth, she would find it herself. She waited until he left for work before she made her move. The moment the front door clicked shut behind him, she wheeled herself toward the garage, her heart pounding in her chest. The door was unlocked. She hesitated for a moment, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting someone to stop her. Then, taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open and rolled inside. The garage felt different in the daylight. The shadows that had once stretched across the floor were now replaced by streaks of sunlight filtering through the small window. But the eerie feeling remained. She moved toward the workbench, her eyes scanning every inch of the table. Up close, the pieces Mark had been working on looked even more complicated. The frame was small, made of sleek metal, and attached to tiny mechanisms she didn't recognize. The blueprints on the laptop screen were still open, filled with technical drawings and codes she couldn't decipher. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, tempted to scroll through his files, but she hesitated. Would this make her just as bad as him? Sneaking around, looking for answers behind his back. She exhaled sharply, forcing herself to focus. She wasn't doing this to betray him. She was doing this because she deserved to know the truth. Carefully, she reached for the laptop's trackpad and scrolled through the open documents. Her eyes skimmed over the text, searching for anything that might make sense. Then she saw it. A folder labeled *Project Phoenix*. Her breath caught in her throat. The name itself sent a chill through her, though she didn't know why. Hands trembling, she clicked it open. Inside were dozens of files, schematics, research notes, test logs. Most of it was too technical for her to fully understand, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just some hobby Mark had taken up in secret. This was something big. Before she could process any further, a soft *ding* from the laptop made her jump. A new message had appeared on the screen. *unknown user. **** status update. We need confirmation that Phase 2 is ready. Sarah's pulse pounded in her ears. Someone else was involved. Someone who clearly knew what Mark was doing. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Should she respond? Should she close the laptop and pretend she had never seen this? Before she could decide, the garage door creaked. Sarah's breath caught as she turned toward the sound. Mark was standing in the doorway. His face was unreadable, but his eyes flickered with something dark, something she had never seen in him before. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then slowly, Mark stepped forward, closing the door behind him. "You shouldn't be in here," he said, his voice low. Sarah's throat felt dry. "And you shouldn't be lying to me." Mark let out a heavy sigh, running a hand through his hair. He looked exhausted, defeated. "I didn't want you to find out like this." She turned the laptop toward him, the message still glowing on the screen. "Who are you talking to?" she demanded. "What is Project Phoenix*?" Mark's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled a chair closer and sat down across from her, his elbows resting on his knees. "I need you to listen to me," he said carefully. "And I need you to promise me that no matter what I say, you won't panic." Sarah's heart pounded. "That's not exactly reassuring, Mark." He exhaled, rubbing his face. "I know, but I need you to trust me." She shook her head. "You keep saying that, but trust goes both ways. You've been sneaking around for weeks, working on something behind my back. I have every right to know what's going on." Mark held her gaze for a moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. "All right," he said quietly. I'll tell you. Sarah leaned forward, bracing herself. Mark glanced at the laptop, then back at her. But you have to promise me one thing. She swallowed hard. What? His expression turned serious. No matter what I say, you can't tell anyone. The words sent a shiver down her spine. The air in the garage suddenly felt heavier, as if they were stepping into something far bigger than she had ever imagined. Sarah nodded slowly, knowing that whatever came next would change everything. Sarah's hands felt cold as she gripped the arms of her wheelchair. The air in the garage seemed to thicken around her, pressing in from all sides. Mark's face was serious, more serious than she had ever seen it. His usual warmth was gone, replaced by something unreadable. It wasn't just secrecy. It was something deeper, something that made her stomach twist with unease. She licked her dry lips, forcing herself to speak. Mark, just tell me. Mark took a deep breath, his fingers tapping against his knee. His eyes flickered toward the laptop, as if weighing how much to say. Then finally, he exhaled and spoke. Project Phoenix. It's something I've been working on for a long time. Before you got hurt. Before everything changed. His voice was low, steady, but there was tension in every word. It started as an idea. A dream, really. Something I wasn't sure was even possible. Sarah frowned, the familiar ache of frustration creeping into her chest. She hated when people danced around the truth, especially now. Possible for what? Mark hesitated. For you, he finally said. Her breath caught. She stared at him, trying to process what he had just said. Me? He nodded slowly, his eyes locked onto hers. After the accident, when they told us you'd never walk again, I couldn't accept it. I know you tried to be strong. I know you told me you were okay, that we could still have a life together. But I saw it, Sarah. I saw the way you looked at the stairs, at the places you used to go without thinking. I saw how much it hurt you. His voice wavered slightly, and he swallowed hard, and I couldn't just do nothing. Sarah's throat tightened. She had spent so much time convincing herself, and him, that she had accepted her condition, that it didn't define her. But the truth was, there were nights when she lay awake, remembering the way she used to move, the freedom she used to have. She blinked, trying to focus. So, what exactly is his project? Mark's gaze flickered to the workbench. It's a neural interface, he said carefully. A system that could reconnect the signals between your brain and your legs. If it works, Sarah. He swallowed, his voice thick with emotion. If it works, you could walk again. The words hit her like a shockwave. For a moment, the world around her blurred, her mind struggling to catch up. He was saying the impossible. He was telling her that everything she had accepted, everything she had resigned herself to, might not be permanent after all. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked at the metal frame on the table, the wires, the blueprints on the laptop. It wasn't just some random project. It was asterisk her asterisk. It was asterisk them asterisk. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She didn't even know what to say. Mark ran a hand through his hair, his shoulders tense. I know it sounds crazy, and I know I should have told you sooner. But I didn't want to give you false hope. I needed to be sure. Sarah inhaled sharply. And are you? Are you sure? Mark hesitated. It was only for a second, but she saw it, the doubt in his eyes, the hesitation in his breath. And in that instant, she knew the answer. No, she whispered. Mark clenched his jaw. Not yet, but I'm close. Closer than anyone has ever been. He leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the table. That's why I've been working so hard. That's why I couldn't tell you. Because if I fail, if this doesn't work, I didn't want you to go through that pain all over again. Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat. And the messages, she asked, nodding toward the laptop. Mark tensed. They're from someone helping me. Someone who knows more about this kind of technology than I do. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Who? Mark hesitated again. Sarah's heart pounded. Mark. He let out a slow breath, his fingers drumming against the table. His name is Dr. Caldwell. He used to work on experimental neuroscience projects, things that were never supposed to exist. He believes in this project as much as I do. He's been guiding me through it, helping me test the interface.